Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Powell. Coming back to you after a little bit of a break from making videos. So not counting yesterday's live stream, I haven't made a video in quite a while. It was a little over a week, I think, or maybe even a week and a half now. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about something that has been on my mind, and it also explains why I have been kind of MIA. So basically, anybody who's been following the channel for a while, you guys probably know that my wife and I, we have a dog, and we love her a lot, and she's been in the family for quite a while. So my wife and her family got the dog from a shelter, like a rescue dog, actually quite a while before I even came into the picture. So I think she had the dog for maybe at least a good year and a half or so before I came in to the relationship with her. So yeah, we've had the dog for a long time, and pretty much the whole time I've known my wife, like, the dog's been there, and Frugi's definitely a part of the family, and she's getting on in years. She's about 10 years old now, and she's not old for a dog yet, but she's kind of not a puppy anymore either. And this past like week and a half or whatever, she's had a lot of issues. So thankfully it seems like she's coming through them, but we were actually quite scared that we might have to put her down. She was suffering quite a bit, and for a few days she pretty much wasn't eating, and her movements were like really bad. She was kind of limping, and she kept changing which leg she was limping on, so it was like really hard to find out what was going on. And I think after it was like 2 days of her not eating very regularly and just kind of moving slightly worse than normal, or kind of she was visibly kind of like off, we brought her to the vet, and she kept getting worse kind of like for another few days after, and to the point that, like I said, she was kind of limping. And the vet was having a really tough time trying to diagnose what was wrong as well, because she kept kind of changing like what the symptoms were. So she had a fever, then we did blood work. It turned out she had some kind of like a pancreatic infection or something like that. And thankfully that seems to have come under control now. We got some shots, we got some medicine for her, and she's actually doing really well. Like right now I'd say she's back to like 95%, pretty good. And the vet is pretty convinced that she's gonna be okay. There's still some other stuff we have to check out on her, because they did an ultrasound on her and everything. It's actually quite a stressful period, so we were back and forth with Frugi to the veterinarian's office a number of times, and it was very time consuming, and I just wasn't in the mood to basically be making videos and stuff. And my wife and I talked a lot about what would happen if if we found out that maybe it was something terminal, or something that wasn't going to be easy to treat. Like, what's the decision? When do you make the decision to euthanize your pet, versus like trying to prolong its life at the expense of kind of like suffering. And I've had experience with this before. So back when I was still in the US, like I was living with my parents for quite some time, and we had a dog. It was kind of like towards the end of my time living with them. It was like high school / college, and we got this little dog. And I think when he was around maybe 7 or 8 years old, he started basically, it was like really like drastic. It was like from one day to the next he stopped eating, and he started exhibiting really like painful symptoms, and he wasn't moving and stuff. And we brought him to the vets, and we found out that he had Lyme disease, and it was like really advanced. And it was like really weird, because he had never exhibited any kind of like symptoms, and then just very, very suddenly he got a lot worse. And we tried all sorts of different treatments for a while, and it went on for probably like 2 weeks, but it was just like he was like really suffering. And eventually we put him down, and I was the one who brought him to the vets. It was a very difficult situation. And yeah, I mean, even I was an adult by then. I was like post college, I was working, and yeah, it was just like a horrible thing. And you struggle with this idea of like, do you you have this like pet, it's an animal, it's like a family member basically, and do you like put it out of its misery, as terrible as that sounds, or do you keep trying to treat it when you can clearly see that nothing's working, and the poor thing is just getting worse and worse? And yeah, I mean, I think really, you have to trust the vet's input and your own kind of like intuition and sense, like looking at the animal, like, is it getting better? Is it eating? Is it in pain? And then try to make the best decision you can. And, the whole reason I wanted to bring this up is also to talk about something that's very important, to me as a vegan. A lot of times people talk about, kind of like pet ownership and how that's, vegan or non-vegan or what have you. And, one of the things that I always go back to in my own mind is the way we treat pets is very, very different than the way we treat, food animals. And one of the key things being is that even if you are ending the life of an animal, it's done out of compassion. Like, there's a lot of people that talk about humane meat, humane slaughter, but in the case of like euthanizing a pet who's got a terminal illness and is not getting better, and that they're just suffering and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can give them painkillers, sure, but like they're just going to suffer worse and die eventually. Like, that is the humane thing to do, I think, is to relieve its suffering. And it's as much as it can be, it's painless. I mean, I saw it myself. I brought the dog and they administered just like one shot out of a needle, and I was there. I was petting him, and he fell asleep in my arms, and then I brought him home and buried him. And that is as nice a thing as you can do, I think, in that situation. And I don't think it can be confused with something else. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that I want to talk about, and one of them is just, I talk a lot about the racing industry for horses and stuff, and I've talked briefly about the treatment of dogs for racing and for hunting in various countries. But like, for example, greyhound racing is kind of ubiquitous throughout much of the developed world, and I wanted to share with you guys some stuff that that I have come across in the past couple days thinking about this issue. So let me just show you guys this article here. This is not a new article. This is coming back from 2006. This is in the UK, and there is this person called David Smith, and he basically made money off of killing greyhounds. So basically, once a greyhound dog is no longer a useful, race kind of quality dog, the owners often kill it. And this guy was basically, I guess he's claimed that he's killed about at least 10,000 dogs in his time, and he has a big field, and he buries them. He moves across from one end of the field to the other, and it takes him about 3 years to fill up the field, and then he goes back to the beginning and he fills it up again. And there's some pretty crazy stuff here. So basically this guy was shooting greyhounds with a captive bolt gun. And in case anybody doesn't know what a captive bolt gun is, it's basically like a gun, except that there isn't a projectile that comes out of the gun, like in the case of a normal kind of firearm. There is like a bolt that slams out from the front of the firearm into the skull of the animal that you're trying to kill, and then it kind of like springs back. So it like stuns them and produces enough brain damage that theoretically the animal is killed relatively instantaneously. Oftentimes you do have to finish the job with a bleeding out of the animal, so cutting its veins and basically just like slicing through the throat and killing the animal that way. I don't think they do that for dogs. They usually just do shoot them like this with the captive bolt gun. And as you can imagine, a lot of people were upset about this, so there were complaints made to the RSPCA, and animal rights groups, of course, were upset, and that's normal. And the reason I bring this up is that I was curious whether or not I had seen petitions online asking for the UK to make it illegal to kill greyhounds with captive bolt guns. And as far as I can see, I did look, the most recent information I had found was from 2018, and it looks like it was still happening and it's not illegal. So this is just a blog entry from Animal Justice Project, and they're calling out all of the stats that they had for greyhound racing, and they're basically saying that the self-reported figures from the Greyhound Board of Great Britain shows that at least 1,000 greyhounds were retired or died, were put to sleep in 2017 alone. 350 were killed because either a suitable home could not be found for them or treating them was deemed too costly. I've talked about this before in the terms of horse racing. People will often just shoot the animals if they have any kind of issues with their feet because it's too expensive to treat it. A horse that can't run is basically no good to a person. So even if it could be treated, they're often just euthanized on the spot, and they're shot on the racetrack. Well, they do the same thing for greyhounds. And they're basically giving you a stat here that is something to think about. They say approximately 24,000 greyhounds are bred every year in Ireland and England. Now that's just those two countries alone, and only 16,000 of which are registered to race. The rest are missing, presumed dead. So you can be pretty sure that, this guy is not alone in killing these greyhounds. I'm sure there's many other people that do this, or also they say that owners are allowed to kill their own dogs and or pay somebody else to kill them. And it's not uncommon for people to do it themselves. So people who race these dogs, I'm sure once the dogs are no longer useful to them, they're killing them themselves. And as far as I could find, if anybody knows for sure, please correct me, maybe just leave a comment, but as far as I understand, it's still legal to kill a greyhound with a bolt gun. So the whole reason I bring this up is that if you're watching this and you might not be vegan and you might be upset at the idea of somebody shooting a dog in the head with a bolt gun simply because it's not able to race as fast as you want it to anymore, I would actually just ask you to think about other animals that go through the same thing and they end up on our plate. This was a interesting study that I found. This was done in Sweden. This is from 2017. They went to an abattoir across, I think it was 5 days or something like that, and they witnessed a total of just under 1,000. So here it is. A total of 998 cattle were observed during routine stunning over 5 consecutive days. The specific facility processes on average 200, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And what they found was that of the 998, just 84.1% were adequately stunned. The remaining individuals were then subjected to either repetitive stunning or slaughter while being semi-unconscious. And this is why I say that there is no such thing as humane meat. I have seen people on Twitter arguing, animal agriculture people, farmers, that they would rather be, basically put out of their misery with a captive bolt gun than other methods. I think it's incredibly misleading when people say something like that. You can see this is just one example. It's one slaughterhouse. I've seen stats ranging from as low as 5%. Some people claim it's even lower than that. Some people, also claim this roughly 15% failure rate. The animals are either have to be shot multiple times, or they are more often than not slaughtered while still conscious. That means being, skinned, being stabbed in the neck, hoofs cut off, dragged, up into the air, horrifically painful things like scalded with water. All these kinds of things are done to these animals while they're still conscious and they're still pretty much aware of what is going on. They just can't move in many cases, and it's a terrible thing. And regardless of which stats you're looking at, the point here isn't to argue with this one particular study. The fact is, Sweden has incredibly high standards and welfare and everything like this for animals, and I'm sure that if it's the case here, it is the case elsewhere. In the U.S., there were recent changes by the Trump administration to increase line speeds at slaughterhouses. The more you rush people, the more they do, mistakes, and the more these, firearms are used, the more maintenance is supposed to be done on them. The more errors can, happen when people aren't maintaining these or cleaning these or whatever. And I just think, like, for somebody to say that they would, take a captive bolt gun to the head as a form of euthanasia for themselves as a human, I just think is being incredibly crass. And if you knew that there was a 15% chance that it wouldn't actually kill you, but would, basically like crush your skull and leave you in immense like pain, and then you would have to get shot again, or maybe even multiple times, or to have your throat slit after as well while you're laying there, semi-unconscious or fully conscious. I think it's incredibly, like, just it boggles my mind that somebody could joke around about that. And I'm going to do a separate video later on. I want to do a video about Temple Grandin. A lot of people kind of point to her as somebody who's done a lot for making, the slaughter of animals be more humane, if that's even possible. And that's going to be a big video, so I'm going to, do a fully separate video about that topic. But for now, I just want to keep this relatively short. And I'll just sum it up here that I think there's a big difference between killing an animal because you want to chop it up into pieces and eat it, and killing an animal because you can see that it's suffering and you want to help relieve its suffering and really, put it out of its misery. There is a huge difference in my mind. And if you think about the comments from these farmers who are saying that they would take the bolt gun to their own heads to be put out of their misery, just imagine, I think, the scene of like going to a hospital and seeing somebody who is asking for euthanasia, and they know they have a terminal illness. I know it's illegal in a lot of countries, and might be illegal where you are. You might even be personally opposed to it, but imagine somebody who actually wants to take their own life because they have some extremely painful terminal illness. Do you think that even in a country where it is legal, like assisted, suicide, for like a physician to come in and instead of injecting some kind of drug that, puts the person to sleep painlessly, versus them just walking in with a bolt gun that has a 15% chance of failure, and then shooting them in the head with that? Like, which one do you think is more humane or more acceptable, And even in the case of like executions for people, like, we don't shoot people in the head with captive bolt guns. Drugs are administered. Now, again, that's a whole other issue because there's often many problems with that. People don't die as painlessly and quickly as you would think, or that we're led to believe from proponents of capital punishment. But again, if you just look at the days of like throwing somebody against a wall and firing squad, that is considered barbaric. Like you think that lethal injection is more humane than shooting somebody or hanging somebody or whatever, I don't know, electrocuting them to death. But yet, as soon as you think about that for animals, people think like, yeah, they're fine with it. It's okay. And, oftentimes people ask me like, well, why couldn't you just euthanize the animals that you're going to slaughter with an injection? And I think what happens, I don't know the answer for sure, but I would think that it's probably to do with food safety. If there's drugs being administered that literally are lethal poisons that will actually stop the heart of the animal, people don't want to be consuming that. So you're not going to be able to use that to euthanize the animal. I think that's what it comes down to, and I'm sure some of it is just money as well. Like, it's probably way more economical to shoot the animal in the head with a captive bolt gun and then slit its throat with a knife, than it is to like have a trained veterinarian that can administer the thing into the right, blood vessel and the cost of the drug itself. So I'm certain that it's primarily economical, but also probably practical in the sense that like you can't use drugs like that in injecting them into the meat supply that people are going to eat. Like, I'm sure there's probably safety concerns about it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if this video is probably like way too much of a downer for the stuff I usually make, and I apologize if it's kind of just graphic in just the description alone, but yeah, I think it was really important to share that with you guys and just really clarify some of these things. And like I say, I will make a kind of a more in-depth video explaining my views on the the humane slaughter and Temple Grandin specifically, because I think there's a lot of kind of people that misunderstand that situation and what she has done or not done. So anyway, that's it. I hope everybody's well, and I hope to be back to a more regular schedule, and we'll see. And thanks everybody for subscribing. I really appreciate your support, and I hope to see you guys in another one soon.